Welcome, everybody, to the Unsprawling Podcast. This is a podcast about Calgary's urban fabric and the folks who are working incredibly hard to improve it. I'm your host, Biz, or Hazen, Ellwood. Both are cool. And I'm here with our friend, great friend of the show, Christopher Chiasson, who is a pedestrian advocate, very activated in the city of Calgary. Got called Toronto Boy at the last City Hall meeting that he went to. Chris, tell us a little bit about your background and what's got you involved in urban activism here in Calgary.
Hey Biz, thanks for having me on the show. It's funny, just anyone can call themselves any sort of advocate, and all of a sudden you got a chyron describing you as such. I grew up in Toronto, as you mentioned. My background as it relates to urban planning, I've spent many years working with and for business improvement areas. BIAs are usually business groups that look after the streetscape, marketing, and events that occur on a busy main street. So I was the executive director for a BIA in Toronto called Cabbagetown, beautiful little neighborhood. Then I moved to Calgary a couple of years ago, about 2.5 years ago at this point. I bided my time for about 2 years looking at the state of our pedestrian accessibility, and after I was here for a couple of years and felt like I had at least enough years under my belt, I started speaking up a little bit about some of the gaps I saw in our pedestrian safety and walkability in the city, and I've been doing my darndest to try to improve the walkability in Calgary ever since.
Absolutely, I think, and we've talked about this a little bit before. I don't remember the details, but I think you had told me that BIAs in Toronto are like a lot more integrated into the municipal government system there, so that they like really are a very important and powerful player in local advocacy, public realm advocacy, in a way that they haven't really been in the city of Calgary, or if they are, they don't really have the same kind of the same power in the city. Can you just talk to me a little bit about what are the levers back there that we could make that relationship better for people?
Yeah, when I first started working at a BIA, I would walk around with the specific bylaw, I think that said about the business improvement area structure in Toronto, and I would just carry this bylaw in my bag everywhere I went on the subway. I would just be flipping through it and trying to get an understanding of this agency, and kind of the basic structure of a BIA is within a given geography, within a certain area, a couple of blocks along a street. Every business owner, every property owner will pay into the budget of this BIA. They will elect a board of directors to look after this budget and allocate resources. Typically, with the goal of improving the economic well-being of that main street. Maybe a helpful way to think about BIAs is by considering their history and how they first started. BIAs were invented in Toronto in the 60s, largely as a response to indoor shopping malls. In the 1960s is when indoor shopping malls started to become more popular. And they were really exciting for people to go into, especially on maybe a hot day, or a winter day. You could go into an indoor shopping mall. There'd be a really nice, walkable structure. You can walk around. It's air conditioned. There'd be foliage, maybe events going on. And it was just a very nice and comfortable experience. But what Main Street businesses, folks who weren't indoor, who were maybe on a busy main street, started to recognize is that they had difficulty competing with these indoor shopping malls. They didn't have a venue to invest into their streetscape, make the sidewalks a little bit nicer, invest into streetscape improvements, do activations the same way that some, private property owner would be able to. For instance, in Toronto, the Eden Centre, owned by Cadillac Fairview, if they want to make the floor, the pavers they've got inside a little bit nicer or make a repair, that's super easy for them to do. It's a private business. However, if you are on a main street and you see that there are some issues with the sidewalk, or that maybe there aren't any flowers or trees, well, who's going to do that? Maybe the city could do an investment there, but they've got competing priorities. You run into the politics. It would be really nice if the businesses together could pool their resources for the greater good. So that's what ended up happening in Toronto. And the first business improvement area, the first BIA, was Bloor West Village. And it was a collection of business owners who recognized, hey, we're greater than the sum of our parts. And if we pool our resources together, we can invest into, flower boxes that might be hanging from streetlights. We can invest into better pavers than crappy concrete. We can, hire bands to perform on the weekends and draw people into the area. And it was really successful. And it became a model that the Toronto City Council entrenched into the city bylaws. And now Toronto has over 80 different BIAs throughout the city, all looking after the business environment and how to improve the economic well-being of that area. And the model has been so successful that now BIAs, you can find them in every major city. I actually had once a situation where I was running a street festival in Toronto, and a guy came up to me, an Englishman, and he said, what's going on here? Like, who runs it? And I said, oh, it's like the local BIA. And he says, oh, that's funny. I look after the downtown London, England BIA. And we had a great conversation just about how, our respective organizations ran. I love BIAs, and it was a really interesting opportunity for me to learn about the small details that contribute to our enjoyment of our public spaces. And it kind of planted a seed for me to look at every small detail of our urban environment and how that can contribute to a business's well-being. I think we can often just walk by a parkette or a tree pit and just think, what's the big deal? But, when you have, those small elements being a productive and an enjoyable element of our street design compared to ugly urban blight, you aggregate the effect of that on thousands of shoppers on a daily basis, you can really dramatically increase or depress the economic vitality of that area. So, working at BIAs really planted a seed for me and how I just think about streetscapes and what makes them effective. Moving to Calgary, though, I was kind of surprised by how the BIAs tend to operate here. Very quickly, it seemed to me as though there was a lot of gaps in terms of the types of programming that BIAs tend to care about in Calgary compared to how BIAs function in Toronto and really every major city worldwide. And I think that walkability is at the heart of it. Whereas, most urban BIAs, their key priority is how do we make sure that people walking around have an enjoyable experience to encourage more foot traffic. It seems like that's not really a priority for a lot of Calgary BIAs. So that's been kind of the origin story for me to want to get more involved, was recognizing that no one was really speaking up about walkability in Calgary. And feeling as though I had maybe a little bit of expertise, hoping that I could maybe provide my input and make our streets just hopefully a little bit nicer.
Totally. And Calgary being such a young city, we've really designed our urban fabric to be a certain way. And that doesn't mean that we can't totally fix it after the fact, but so much of our city is built in the post-war environment. I looked at Kensington, Calgary on Street View, which to me is the best part of Calgary. It's the most beautiful spot with kind of the most intact sense of place. And then you look over it at Kensington in Toronto, and I almost threw up. I was like the rug had been pulled out under me. I was like, oh my God, the businesses are so much closer to each other. It's almost impossible for cars to come and interrupt the area. It's just such a different vibe. And I had just it was insane. And I like that you talked about the origin of malls, because obviously malls are have not been implemented very effectively into the urban fabric, and usually are like a very sort of cordoned off type of land use that doesn't play well with anything else, surrounded by parking lots. But one thing that they really do have is a sense of arrival and place, of kind of having this environment where the whole thing feels very cohesive in a way, and that's definitely one of the most important things for a street that feels like it's really functioning.
Totally. I mean, I think something that might, like, when it comes to the comparison between Kensington in Calgary and Kensington Market in Toronto, it's a really difficult thing for me to describe to folks who grew up in Calgary, and this is where I feel the most like I'm some sort of annoying interlocutor coming from Toronto and trying to tell Calgarians how to plan their city. But there is a really subtle, intangible feeling of a lack of safety as a pedestrian in Calgary that you don't really quite feel in the downtown of Toronto. And a lot of this comes down to, just very bureaucratic planning decisions around things like street width. That's like a key feature of Kensington Market. Where, Calgary might have, lanes that are, 12 meters wide in some areas. Kensington Market is going to have an 8-meter wide lane. So what does that lead to? It means that every time someone's crossing the street, they spend less time feeling like they're being bared down by a vehicle, and more time, walking around. And small interactions like that, I think, can really lead to people feeling like they are encouraged to linger, rather than they need to hurry off from the street. And then when we talk about the indoor mall versus outdoor Main Street experience, I think it's a really important thing to talk about when we discuss, say, efforts to improve walkability on a main street, because I think we often can sometimes have these issues framed as like people who like to walk versus people who drive everywhere. And I think that's it's a distinction that doesn't actually exist, because everyone prefers walkable experiences. When we think about the places that anyone likes to go and likes to visit, people prefer going to places where walking around is prioritized. Think about the Calgary Stampede. If you were trying to walk around and get a corn dog, but there was a truck right next to you, that whole experience on the Stampede grounds wouldn't be quite as enjoyable. Likewise, you wouldn't want to go to the mall if there's a motorcycle speeding past you all the time. I mean, think about, I think Disney World is an example I like to talk about a lot. I think in a large way we've ceded these urban walkable experiences to these private environments, rather than them being something that is public and accessible everywhere. And it's really a shame, because when we walk around, we are I think more in touch with our community. We have a better sense of how we can contribute and collaborate with people, rather than it being just a purely consumer experience, which is, I think, often what happens when we only are walking around in a private mall or at Disney World or what have you.
Totally. And I think especially when things are a little bit closer together, it's even that much easier and that more visceral and connected to the environment around you. One thing I've noticed doing some pop-up engagements around the city for various exciting projects that are happening is people are almost like, if you have a sign up that says ice cream, people know what you are and they know to come and say, hey, can I buy some ice cream? But if you're saying I'm doing community engagement, that's not something that people know how to start a conversation with. And they might even be like a little like or if they see just any sort of pop-up tent, they just immediately think that's somebody who's going to ask me for my credit card, and so they'll just avoid it completely. People just don't want to talk to each other when it comes to things like this. One thing I will, because we're on the topic of Kensington, I wasn't actually even going to talk about BIAs. that wasn't on my plan, but it is such an interesting little thing and such a valuable part of our urban fabric. But the Kensington BIA is currently working on this project with ActivateYYC. I don't know if you've heard of this, called Parking Day, which the City of Calgary had done before COVID and then stopped doing during COVID, to just bring a little bit more joy into that environment, where I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to say like all parking is going to be, there might still be some parking, but I think most of the parking, at least in the Kensington BIA, will be used for individual or organizations pop-up things. So it's just like about this, how do we repurpose our space for something that is more valuable than just parking for one person driving one car. And so people are challenged to come up with lots and lots of different ideas. And so hopefully come September 20th to 22nd on that weekend, it'll be a very exciting place to go down and see all of the creative things that people have come up with. And absolutely get involved in doing one of these yourself. I know Strong Towns is working on one. There's been a couple murmurs about doing one with More Neighbors. I'm sure like every other advocacy organization is talking about it, and they need like a leader to come and say, here's my idea, here's what we should do. So yeah, absolutely get involved and get some context on that one. What I wanted to dive into here on a bit of a more somber note is talking about kind of the sense of place and the cohesiveness of a street and the safety of a street. Unfortunately, Alberta has now officially lost our like little Switzerland, kind of our most successful pedestrianization experiment, at least in the Bow Valley region, if not the entire province, on Banff Ave, with the Town of Banff deciding to follow a plebiscite, which saw 52.6% of voters in that plebiscite say we want to stop doing the pedestrianization on Banff Ave, which I think is it's a 2-block sort of pedestrian zone that's usually shut down from Victoria Day to Thanksgiving. And that's been a little bit controversial because of, for whatever reason, Parks Canada doesn't like it, which is always so weird to me. Like Parks Canada seems to have just like the opposite, like they never advocate for their own interests, which bugs me. But yes, a very tight but decisive, like about 53 to 47 vote to take away the pedestrian zone in the town of Banff. Chris, what's your kind of make of this? What was your reaction when you heard that news?
Oh, I was devastated. This is, I think, a big loss to the residents of Banff, to the thousands of people who visit the town center every year, to the business owners in the area who are going to have a much less successful summer than in previous years. I mean, it's for so many reasons. It's anti-science. It's anti-logic. I think it goes against even the preferences of a lot of people. I mean, not to get too much into like the political science of like the plebiscite, but I mean, you can have a lot of discussions around how much this actually represents the will of the people compared to a highly motivated minority who has looking after their selfish self-interest rather than what is more positive for the whole. And I think this is going to be probably a big trend, I think, whenever we try to pursue any sort of improvements towards walkability. There will always be a minority of very car-dependent people who reject the benefits that walkability provides other people and are concerned purely with their selfish interests around parking and their definition of convenience. And I think it really speaks to the importance to be more proactive around engagement for walkability, especially with business owners and especially with the community. It's not enough to implement a project like this and then have it, let it stay and then not do anything about it. When a pilot project goes in or when any sort of pedestrianization occurs, that's the start of the project. That's the start of your engagement. You need an active steward of any sort of pedestrianization like that to fight for it, to continuously advocate for its success, to do data collection about how how this project is affecting local business owners. I think often people just don't have the information they need to effectively evaluate a situation like this. I think we can't expect every person out there in the world to be a student of local economic development and a student of mobility solutions. So it's a shame that there wasn't a driving force in there that was fighting for this, and it's a big loss. But I'm a perennial optimist, and I think after next summer, and I think when business owners recognize the decline of revenue they're going to see from this, we're going to see a strong argument to return to this program, and I'm sure it'll return within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think one thing that definitely I checked the math on, because the town of Banff doesn't have a hell of a lot of people, right? It's I think there are about 4,000 or so eligible electors, and it was only about 2,000 votes that actually came in for this. So it was about a 56.7% turnout on this, which speaks to your point of that's why we really, really need a good positive message and a positive messenger to organize these things, because it is a minority, but it's a shockingly large minority of eligible voters who didn't care about this enough to mail in a ballot or show up to the polls. And there was of course, actually there's the Friends of a Better Banff Ave was the advocacy organization that had mobilized the yes side on this issue. They've got actually a very fantastic website. It's all yellow, and they showed up and did like this marching protest on one of the days where everybody wore yellow, and they said we're going bananas for Banff Ave, which was quite fun and interesting. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about what do you think? It's so heartbreaking to me that it's like now we have to live with the results of what has happened with this plebiscite for at least like the next year, if not the next couple of years. And one thing that the town of Banff has said is now we have to start actually demolishing and throwing away all of these beautiful assets that we've put together to create this experience for people. And just talk with me a little bit about, like, if you're Friends for a Better Banff Ave, what do you kind of do to recover from this and continue fighting for this?
A January 6th style insurrection of Banff City Hall? I don't know. No, of course not. I joke. Parody, satire.
Satire!
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can do. I think there is always opportunity for a little bit of respectful troublemaking in this way. We talk about Kensington Market, and if you haven't been to Kensington Market, it's one of the, I think one of the real gems in Canada generally of this just really lovely kind of anarchic collection of small businesses in a very compact and tight neighborhood in Toronto. So I lived in the neighborhood for many years, and it's really a jewel. And how did Kensington Market come to be fantastic? It didn't come from some top-down decision by the city to say, hey, let's create this. It came from, after World War II, a lot of immigrants moving into the area and setting up shops in their front living rooms. It wasn't zoned for that. They just did it. And I think likewise, I would love to see more people, if you've got a parking spot in front of your business, I think there needs to be a little bit more creative solution making in these situations of, put out a patio in front of there, test the issue a little bit, within safety's reasons, but it breaks my heart that stuff like this happens, and I think that if people are willing to fight the point a little bit, I think they'd be surprised to see how successful they'd be.
Yeah, I totally agree. At some point,
Not telling anyone to break the law, though. Biz.
Yeah,
I want to make that clear.
be careful. Not legal advice.
But you got to be a little pugnacious with these
absolutely.
things, I think,
it's got to. It does have to turn into action. One thing I would say is I think this is such an issue that I think has to be visually expressed. It's such a thing that especially in these building environments are the kinds of people that you need to convince to agree to this sort of thing are the kind of person that have no visual reference point for what the hell you're talking about when you say, I want to pedestrianize this street. And so it's really, really difficult to build a coalition that supports this kind of thing without creating something and saying, hey, look at this, isn't this so great, and wouldn't it suck if we removed this?
And I think that's you're hitting on like the most frustrating point about this dynamic here is that the people who are opposed to this sort of pedestrianization, this people-first urban planning, these aren't usually the people who are taking advantage of these public spaces. These are people who live atomized life where they, get out of their house, get into their car, and, go somewhere else without ever interacting with another human being. We'll get to this later, but, I've got people, DMing me because of my pedestrian advocacy, accusing me of, being a World Economic Forum who is getting, deposits of gold from Klaus Schwab. It's insane. Like, these aren't the people who are even visiting the areas we're talking about. These are loners. Like, I can't put too much of a fine point of it. Like, I can't see how anyone who actually visits these areas can honestly tell me that they don't enjoy them. I think they just don't end up visiting.
It's definitely kind of a Tim Walz-esque, like, this is kind of a weird way to frame like this sort of thing. And I find this a lot of the time is even having friends and connections with other people, like essentially, or like getting things done must mean that you have some kind of secret money backing you. You must have money wizards in your basement. Yeah, exactly. Like, this is hard work.
It'd be a lot easier,
that's what this is about. Like, we're so passionate that we're doing this in our free time, getting this type of work done, and that's like really the energy that it takes to get these things accomplished, which is I would say it's unfortunate, but that's literally like how everything works in the world. We'll talk a little bit about the debate here, because it is actually very interesting, the coalition that was pulled together to create a shaky but majority of this plebiscite in Banff for Banff Ave. The leader of it was originally started as a petition, which we'll talk about because we know Chris loves petitions. But the person who started the petition is this lady named Leslie Taylor, who's actually the former mayor of Banff back from the early 90s, and then she was also a councillor for Banff kind of around the 2010s, from 2007 to 2013. But she got this petition together, and of course there's a variety of very, very bad arguments that people will throw at this. There was actually quite a lot of misinformation coming out about the issue regarding should we continue pedestrianizing Banff Ave, lots of fear. But I will give Leslie a little bit of credit in that the way that she chose to frame it is, but it's very frustrating, because you hear this a lot in politics, especially I feel like in this area, is this masking of very, very negative action in kind of a positive rhetoric. And so what you always hear is, oh, well, it's not like I'm opposed to the concept of this or the idea of this. I just think we need to rethink the execution. But of course, what's really frustrating about this is that if rethinking the execution is what you really wanted to do, why wouldn't you rethink the execution, bring that plan forward, and then we would do it? And so this is why I think it's so important to be for something instead of be against something. Like, really try to find out what's at the core of some of the cynical things and the way that people approach these issues, and try to unpack those and see what we can really do to create positive change. But like, the core of the argument is that because we've pedestrianized Banff Ave, that traffic then overflows into residential communities. And the core of the argument was that basically we don't want the cars in our residential communities because cars suck. And so we think it would be a preferable alternative to put that same traffic back onto Banff Ave. Talk to me a little bit about, because I know this has come up with 17th Ave as well. Talk to me about how that kind of framing makes you feel.
Oh, it's inconsistent compared to other policies that these people communicate. Where, I think there's a certain. I think a lot of people's political ideology is summed up in whatever benefits me narrowly right now, without any sort of consideration for other approaches. So, look, I don't have any sort of traffic data in front of me around how much traffic was ending up in these residential communities, but I would encourage these people, if they have, say, frustrations with the number of cars in Banff. Well, I would love to hear them being very vocal supporters for a passenger rail between Banff and Calgary. There are things like that they could speak up for. I would love to hear them talking about, developing within Banff alternative transportation solutions to move people more effectively outside of cars. I think that it's less so that they're concerned about vehicular traffic in their residence. It's more so that when you're a homeowner in a wealthy area like this, you want to close the door behind you and make sure that no one else can enjoy the area. You want to reduce the number of people that you have to interact with. I think that it's less so that they're anti-cars in their neighborhood. I think it's just they're anti-other people in their eye line. So it's a shame. And when we make these decisions that are benefiting a narrow, already pretty well-off minority of the population, rather than considering the benefits for the whole of the population of the people who are actually visiting the area, it just doesn't feel like it's a fair distribution of the value of the area.
Totally. And I think it speaks to the interconnection between a lot of these different issues. You talked about we need to bring transit into Banff if we really want to curb this. And another thing I'd say, if you really don't want people driving around on your streets, get rid of the parking lots in Banff, right? If you get rid of the parking lots, people aren't going to have a place to park. And so why would they go through your community? They wouldn't want to. If there's nowhere for them to store their car on point B, then they're not going to go from point A to point B through your community. And so it has to be done in lockstep, where we need kind of all of these things to start moving in an incremental way at once. And so that's why it's quite difficult to see other countries that have made this progress over a very long period of time, and they kind of have lots of things that work very well for them, and just kind of see people like, when they understand the work that it takes to get from here to there, they see how difficult that's going to be, because of course it will be, but not the inflection point in which that work actually translates into a better quality of life for everybody. And so I definitely feel that same way, especially when it comes to traffic, when it comes to parking, when it comes to cars. Everybody hates it. Nobody likes it. This is just a thing that nobody likes at all for the exact same reasons. And I love, this isn't, I'm not going to use exactly Mayor of Banff, Corey DeMando's words, but she essentially framed this issue very well, where she said, you know what, like, we are going to stick to the results of this plebiscite, right? Because this is what our residents want. But like, I really want you to know that we are not stopping here. We're going to continue trying to make Banff a pedestrianized town, somewhere where people can get around without requiring a car, because that's ultimately what people are upset about here. Is the congestion and the noise and the just the pollution, the lower quality of life that cars taking up spaces that are meant for people bring. And like, whether it's a residential neighborhood or an urban main street, I think both of these places deserve to be treated seriously, and the people who enjoy these places deserve to be treated seriously. This is one thing our friend Serene Yu got in the papers a little bit about for going up to council. If anybody's heard of, obviously, the arena deal in the City of Calgary. But one thing that's very interesting is that the City of Calgary has like made adjustments to their noise bylaws, their noise exposure bylaws, because it's less expensive to do that and just choose to not enforce noisy conditions than to make the developers of that property deal with the noise that their construction is creating. And so
right, the situation was like, in order to properly soundproof the Scotia Place, it would cost a lot of money to be to abide by the noise bylaw.
Okay, so it was actually like a permanent change to that area, but they also had done some relaxations during the construction period. And so this obviously incenses the people, families, lots of them living in the Guardian or the Arriva complex there, which is believe it or not, right there. And so I think it's what she said that's kind of stuck with me is like, how are we going to create a sustainable city if we're not taking the needs of families that are living in urban environments seriously? Like if we're going to just prioritize the like comfort of suburban residents over the exact same problems that we're trying to navigate here in this environment where we're actually dealing with them on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, it's pass the buck democracy. Just let it be someone else's problem. Yeah.
But one thing, and I'll get back to this. Actually, good news is that Canmore is not going in the same direction. Canmore had recently completed a survey that showed that almost 90% of its residents are very, very supportive of its pedestrian experience.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
So it'll be very interesting to see if kind of the tourism message shifts over to Canmore in the recent years, which I feel like is definitely a bit more of a it's definitely a bit more of like a town where people actually live. It feels like.
I was wondering why that is. I wonder if maybe like the residents of Banff are a little like wealthier perhaps, whereas Canmore is more working class.
Or I do really wonder if the Parks Canada scare works, because I think Canmore is on provincial land, unless I'm crazy. So it's like Parks Canada comes in and says, hey, we don't like this and we want you to stop doing it. I think that does give a lot of credence to residents, just authoritatively to say we need to bring an end to this, even if it's not actually for the same reason. I feel like that would definitely act as some kind of catalyst to this. But basically what happened, we'll start with a little bit of the history, is for this to happen, former Mayor Leslie Taylor had to start a petition. And we have had a recent run-in with this in Calgary, knowing that the Municipal Government Act of Alberta requires that for city council or town council to take your petition seriously, you need 10% of the population that lives in that municipality to be signed on the petition, which is impossible to do in Calgary, right? It's just not going to happen. But in Banff, that was only like about 1,000 people. And so that's kind of nifty. You only have to organize 1,000 people to get this petition together, which is not quite how it works in Calgary, but it didn't stop you from trying. So I want to talk a little bit about this 17th Ave Open Streets campaign that you got started with, the petition that you started to just say, hey, let's have this crazy idea to open up 17th Ave to be safer for pedestrian traffic, and it'll be better for business, better for everybody. Kind of walk me through some of the vibes as that was getting started and some of the inspiration.
Well, you know what? I wish I could take credit for this idea, but it's been floating in the water, I think, for a very long time to pedestrianize 17th Avenue, at least during the summer temporarily. It was started after, I believe, the Residents Association had made some request to the local BIA, the 17th Ave BIA, saying this is something that we should do. And the BIA actually started a survey, started 2 surveys asking local business owners, as well as they ran concurrently a survey for residents in the area for how would they feel about some pedestrianization of 17th Avenue. This survey was run in, I think, the spring of 2023. After about a year, so coming up to spring of 2024, there hadn't been any sort of update. The BIA never released the results of this survey. Stephen Wilhelm at the Calgary Herald, who I think covers some of this, urbanism as part of his responsibilities at the Herald, reached out to the BIA and said, like, hey, like, whatever happened to these survey results? The BIA shared him the actual document with the business surveys, and then they claimed that they just lost access to the resident survey, so they didn't have that information anymore, which we can talk about the validity of that later. In the survey results, and this is all published in the Herald, in the survey results, they shared that 23 businesses had responded to their survey. For context, there are 700 businesses within the 17th Avenue BIA. So the Herald ran this story saying, we're 17th Avenue is unlikely to pedestrianize this summer. This is in spring of this year. They ran the story, quoting, lack of interest from business owners and a lack of published interest from residents. And I was reading this article and just thinking, this is a little weird. It's very strange for... It's like just so on the surface a bad engagement process. You got 700 businesses, 23 of them responded, 16 of which were opposed, 7 of which were in favor, and then saying it's not worth looking into whatsoever. So for two reasons. One, that's a bad engagement process. That is a 35% response rate. Sorry, 3.5% response rate, of which a fraction of which said no. And then additionally, it is the role of a BIA to be an expert when it comes to the effective planning of their commercial street. So while you might have business owners who are saying this is going to be bad for business, you have a responsibility to be the sober second thought and to make recommendations to those businesses around what's actually going to be beneficial. If you are, running a coffee shop, you are, running a secondhand clothing store, you're not going to be up on the details of how pedestrianization affects the commercial viability of a main street. Fair, rightly so. You're running your business, you're not going to be poring over urban planning literature all day. It's really the role of a BIA to be the expert and give good advice to businesses as to how, we can plan our street to be more effective for everyone. The BIA didn't do that work. They weren't doing this sort of research. They weren't doing this sort of engagement. For instance, when I was the executive director of the Cabbagetown BIA, we worked with MasterCard to do merchant level data whenever we would do a street festival. So, a couple times throughout the year, we would close off certain sections of Parliament Street, which is the main street we were on, and we would run studies with MasterCard to find how pedestrianization, when we closed off these streets, how did that affect the merchant level success during those weekends. And it's very clear. There would be more individual transactions during those street festivals, and the per transaction value was much higher. And this is not an uncommon study. Like any BIA worth its weight is doing this sort of research because it's pretty critical work. 17th Avenue had never engaged in this sort of research whatsoever. For why, I have some ideas, but they just weren't really being an intelligent communicator around pedestrianization in the street, what the implications were, and why it's actually something that businesses should support. So anyways, with all this context, I was pretty frustrated to see how they spoke about pedestrianization, claiming that businesses were very opposed to it. I thought that it is something worth pursuing. My experience has shown me it's great for businesses. All the literature supports it. Every person I talk to, that are residents in the area seems to be in support of it. And I was pretty frustrated that this undemocratic board of, directors made up of, drive-through owners and parking lot owners got to tell us, the residents, that, no, we're not going to pursue this thing. So, just doing, what anyone does when they don't have a lot of money or power, but they got an internet connection, I started a change.org petition. Didn't really expect it to go anywhere, but just thought, hey, this is better than nothing. Sent it to a couple of friends. got about 40 responses. I sent it to the BIA, said, hey, I'm doing this. I would love to chat. Let me know what you think. The BIA emailed me back saying that I was defaming them and they threatened to sue me. And that was very surprising for me. And it sounds ridiculous to say, but it's just what happened. And that was a big cue for me that, oh, there's a little something that's special about this BIA. That they, that this isn't like a BIA I've dealt with in the past that is like, you know, I don't know, fairly dealing with information. This is a BIA that feels like that they're actually the ones in charge. Now, to give the dynamic, you know, and this is my experience running a BIA. This was the experience of all my friends who also ran BIAs. Was we had a very respectful relationship with our community. Now, there would always be situations where the desires of the business community might not be exactly the same as the desires of the residential community. But obviously, the people who are living right next to the main street, those are your customers. Those are the people who are going to be shopping there every day. So it's really, really important that if ever a resident came to you with some concern, you know, you're not necessarily going to be able to act on it right away. But you want that to be a good, healthy relationship, because these are, you know, these are the people you're going to see. You're going to walk by them, you know, just next door every day. So, like, you should have a good relationship with them. So to get that email back from Talene Stysol, the executive director of the 17th Avenue, threatening me with a lawsuit for starting my little, I'll be honest, my little insignificant change.org petition was shocking to me. I was like, why, who am I? I'm just like some guy. Why are you so angry at me? And it felt like I must be like picking at some scab, like some conversation they didn't want to have. Now, strategically from them, if they didn't want this to be something that had a lot of attention put on it, I think they acted just idiotically, frankly. You know, like, look up the Streisand effect, right? Like, telling someone that they're legally not allowed to talk about something is the best way to get a lot of people interested in that issue. So from that experience, you know, I'm feeling pretty motivated. I started reaching out to a lot of people. I developed a good relationship with the Residents Association. I reached out, chatted more with you, Biz, with a lot of the great folks at Unsprawling, and just trying to get more attention on this issue. We've developed a more effective engagement process with the Residents Association, where, you know, within 2 weeks, so basically, you know, I started a petition just on change.org. But recognizing, like, you know, me doing it by myself is probably not the best way to do this as an advocate, I started working with the Residents Association, the Beltline Neighborhoods Association, for a little bit more of a holistic engagement process to, you know, survey the business owners in an informed manner as well as the residents. For a week, I just walked up and down 17th Avenue, pounding the pavement, walking into businesses, asking them how they felt about 17th Avenue pedestrianization. Frankly, the kind of work that a BIA should be doing, but for whatever reason they didn't do it. After doing that, you know, we doubled the number of responses we got from businesses compared to the BIA. And unlike some of the reporting that the BIA had done, they gave some comment to City News saying that 85% of businesses were opposed. That's bullshit. That's malarkey. That's just not true. That number was not borne out in even the engagement they had done, and it was certainly not borne out in the conversations that I have had. In fact, what we instead found was that most of the businesses that people actually like on 17th Avenue, the restaurants, the stores, those businesses are pretty much universally in support of pedestrianization. Those businesses recognize the value of it. The businesses who aren't in support of it, the ones who I think that the BIA is speaking for, represent major corporations and represent businesses who aren't even at grade. The businesses who are opposed are like communications consultants on the 4th floor of some commercial building. And that is not what a BIA is meant to represent. You know, and I will go back to the origin story of a BIA. BIAs are meant to increase foot traffic to an area. That is what their primary purpose is. So instead, we've got a BIA who seems to have been captured by these, communications firms, by these folks who are up on the fourth floor of some building who don't give a crap about the at-grade except for actually to maybe decrease the vibrancy of it, because all they want to do is just have, an easy drive in, from I don't know, from Chestermere or something, and don't actually care about the viability or care about the residents in the area whatsoever, because the residents aren't even their customers. Or, the people who are opposed to it are like McDonald's, the McDonald's drive-through, because they're worried about their drive-through traffic. Or, who else is opposed to it? Atlas Development Group, because they own a bunch of surface parking lots on the area, and so that's all they care about, is just getting more cars onto the road who are going to be able to park there. So we've run into this situation where an organization which was designed and implemented to benefit the foot traffic and to benefit the at-grade commercial businesses has in fact now been captured by a bunch of businesses who don't care about the people in the neighborhood, who don't care about the residents whatsoever. And it's incredibly frustrating because, how dare they think that they get the final say on this? How dare a bunch of big businesses, a bunch of corporations say that our desire for this public space supersedes your desires, supersedes the desires of all the independent and locally owned coffee shops, of the local retailers and clothing stores, of the dozens of fantastic restaurants in the area who are all in support of this. Instead, this public organization, because that's what they are, every BIA is a public organization, their board of directors is made up by a bunch of business owners by a bunch of business representatives, I should say rather, who don't represent the community, who don't care about the viability of the community, who really just care about their bottom line and not actually what the residents care about. So it's incredibly frustrating. But the thing is, we're going to be successful because the facts are on our side, the residents' community is on our side, and frankly, the businesses that matter are on our side too. So what we're going to do, working alongside the Residents Association, it should really be the BIA who's planning this sort of thing, but, they don't have the capacity to do it, obviously, so we're going to do it for them. So we are going to do a pedestrian pilot next summer. We're going to put the permit in to open the street up to pedestrians in the evenings and the weekends throughout next summer. And it's going to be fantastic. And you know what? Every person who thought it might not be great, they're going to visit 17th Avenue and they're going to have a great fucking time. Because the moment we do it, they're going to see all the people walking around having a wonderful time. And any concern that there would be any decline towards business is going to go out the window. Because it's going to be obvious from the first hour we do it, when people start flooding the street. So yeah, that's the story of 17th Avenue pedestrianization. Yeah.
The charismatic Chris Chiasson we've found the can of worms that we can open. Absolutely, yes. It's I think it boils down to it, and I've done a lot of conversations with various community organizations around the city, and I definitely feel this when I'm running Unsprawling, or if I'm doing the work I do with a few other organizations, is you do kind of reach a limit where all the people who are engaged about this sort of thing and are interested about this kind of thing, you reach a bit of a saturation point. And sometimes that saturation point is not enough to cover for your expenses as an organization. And so a lot of, especially community associations, they're just like, I have no idea how to get money. And so I can understand why maybe even a communications firm would end up on the board of directors because, we want somebody who can run our social media because that's the most important part of our business for getting more engagement. But, whoopsie daisies, then somewhere along the way we forget how to really like actually balance those interests in a way that makes sense. I think a lot of that is just like community building is a very, very, very new and undeveloped sector in the city of Calgary. I think is really teaching people how to set aside some of the things that undoubtedly will cause them some discomfort for various reasons, and understand the common good, and really and and yeah, just like work together as a community to make some of these things better for everybody, even if there might be some difficult things that we need to think about along the way. And that's what I love so much about the idea of the pilot, is it's not like we're permanently doing this. We're just going to try it out. And you know what? There might be a few businesses, because obviously, I mean, like the parking lots and the drive-throughs are a totally different story, but there very well might be some businesses in particular that do not do so well with pedestrianization, at least at first. And I do think that it's our responsibility to balance those interests. That doesn't mean that we're just going to shut the whole thing down because of a couple people who for various reasons it's not integrating with them very well. But the work is really to dig deeper, see what kinds of things are causing that integration problem, and see what we could do about it. And that's kind of what I want to get into, is some of the specific feedback. If we put aside some of the people who are very obviously not interested in this for I don't want to say like necessarily nefarious, but definitely kind of.
I already use nefarious reasons. Yeah,
it's like profit seeking. It's profit seeking in a way that doesn't really mesh very well with the interests of consumers or residents or business owners at the street level. But there definitely are some things.
Seeking for if you're a small business and you're looking for profit, hey, I support you. I respect you. That's fantastic. Totally. But the notion,
maybe rent seeking is the better term.
But it's like the notion that I should sacrifice the livability of my neighborhood so that McDonald's is able to sell a few extra hamburgers on a daily basis.
They even have a new patio over there.
Oh, like it's insane. Come on. Like, well, oh gosh, I mean the 17th Avenue McDonald's is like, the fact that they allowed a drive-through on the street is one of the worst planning decisions the city has ever made. So yeah, like I support people who are looking for, they care about their business and they're concerned. And for any business owner who is concerned about the impact that pedestrianization might have on them, like I respect that and I care about that. But when someone has an opinion that is not based off of, what research actually tells us what's going to happen, we can't just listen to that opinion and then like decide everything over that. We need to bring them information and help them understand what the actual impacts of this might be.
And sometimes bring them actual assets. This is one of the most frustrating things about the rezoning debate, as we all remember, is a lot of this, but what about the trash? And it's like, oh, okay, well, we can run the trash services more often, right? It's like this, people have very, very little trust in kind of the follow through with this, and that's why I think that's such an important part of the communications work that has to be done on these things. Have you seen any particular pieces of feedback from the business community that you'd say are kind of like valid concerns that you could work towards? Because I think one of the things that really determines if a open streets program is successful, because like anybody can just blockade a street, but the difference between a dead program and like a very lively, vibrant program is that area getting the resources it needs to be a place where people can interact with it and feel safe, and is there like bands, like you had said at the start, that this live music or these other programming events that make people actually want to return and keep coming back. What are some of the plans some of the things that you've heard and some of the plans to mitigate or like really push forward the success of this program?
Yeah, I mean, like the concerns around that we hear from businesses is number one going to be parking. And that, I think, derives from a couple of biases. I mean, first and foremost, people overestimate the degree, the proportion of their customers that actually arrive by car. And that's due to a couple of reasons. One, when people walk places, they don't leave evidence that they walked somewhere. So it's just harder to visualize the people that do that. But if you drive somewhere, well, yeah, you can see that, this guy left his giant truck outside. It's very clear that he drove there. So we've got all these kind of artifacts of people who've driven into a main street. But, people don't lay down some sort of sticker because they walked there. So people just, tend to think, oh, I see all these cars. A lot of people drove here without seeing the bigger picture of all the traffic. Likewise, if I'm a customer and who drove someplace, I might have had difficulty finding parking. So what do? Oh, I walk into this restaurant. I say, oh, it's so difficult to find parking out here. So if you're a server, you're an owner of this business, you walk away thinking, wow, a lot of people had difficulty finding parking. We must need to improve parking into this area. Well, that's because everyone who walked there, everyone who cycled there, didn't have an issue, getting there. There wasn't some big trauma that afflicted them at the end of their journey. It's because it's a superior mode of transportation. They showed up and they didn't have any sort of complaints, so they didn't hear about it. No one walks in and says, I had such difficulty moving my 2 feet to walk into the business. So the business owner to say, oh,
which is sometimes totally a problem. In this case,
yeah, right.
In this case, give yourself a ramp or something. Put a step on there.
Yeah, so they just don't have an appreciation for the actual proportion of people who are walking into the area. Again, this is an area where a competent BIA, would be doing this sort of engagement and surveying with visitors into the area to figure out, okay, what proportion of our customers are actually arriving by foot via car, and sharing those insights to their business, the business members in the BIA, and being able to actually help them understand the situation. But because they haven't done that kind of work, the businesses don't actually have an accurate understanding of how many people are arriving by foot versus by car. The second thing we might hear about is people talking about the sense of they did a city TV piece, city news piece a couple days ago, and one person they spoke to talked about people like the activity of the cars bring, that there's a certain I like to see the cars go by. And I view this as a complete bullshit point, frankly. I fully believe if you were to take a survey of 100 people walking along 17th Avenue, you would get 10 people saying they like to see the nice cars outside, and then you'd see 90 people saying that these cars make my life a living hell every time they rev their engines. Because I think often the people who say, I like to see these cars, I don't think they actually visit the area all that much. They definitely don't live in the area all that much. Because, yeah, it might be fun to see that Lamborghini drive by and rev its engines one time because you come downtown, a couple times during the summer. But if you're actually on these streets every day, I can take not seeing a Lamborghini if that means that I'm not going to have it give me an ear-splitting headache every time it drives past me. And you know what? The vibrancy that you think we're getting from cars, I'll tell you what, you're going to get a far preferable amount of vibrancy by seeing people walking by, okay? By having bands that are going to be on the street as well. A pedestrianization pilot isn't going to go well if you don't activate it properly. If you don't put out the necessary street furniture and activation opportunities to make people feel like they actually want to come in and enjoy the area. I will always quote Walkable Cities, the book. Safe, comfortable, useful, interesting. There's 4 components of a good street. It's got to be safe. People need to feel like they can walk around there without being hit by a car or, have some other ill befall them. Comfortable, right? They need to have necessary shade opportunities. They need to feel like the street was designed to make sure they feel comfortable. There needs to be places for them to sit when they get tired. Useful. Okay, there needs to be places that they are able to visit that are going to help them in their day-to-day. There's going to be, good stores that they can visit into. There's good shops that they want to visit. Interesting, okay? There's got to be cool stuff to look at, right? This is something that I think Calgary has always been bad at, skeptical at, is the value of public art and the value of providing experiences that are delightful to people. So yeah, if you don't have those 4 elements of safe, comfortable, useful, interesting, then things aren't going to be well implemented. What's been frustrating, 17th Avenue has been going through, in my opinion, a poorly executed sidewalk construction over the past 2 years. And people will point towards that and say, hey, I've had 2 lanes closed in front of my business, and this has been bad for my business. And now you're saying we should close down all the streets? Well, now it's going to be even worse. And I find that comparison just like in such bad faith, because for starters, well, it's not a very comfortable experience when I've got some backhoe, beeping and, very loud digging up dirt right next to me, right? That's discouraging. So it's less because we've closed off the traffic, it's because we've got all these giant construction equipment hanging around. And then additionally, there was a big missed opportunity to activate the space on the street. The fact that the BIA wasn't hiring bans along these closures, the fact that they weren't investing into public art, into where these closures were, I think was a dereliction of duty. So it's so frustrating is when people when we have these half measures that are ineffectively implemented, and then people look at that as though it's some example of what pedestrianization can be. So, big priority for us is to partner with a lot of different organizations, partnering with Sustainable Calgary when it comes to activating and beautifying the space, partnering with Sled Island, when it comes to, finding great bands and musicians that are going to be able to perform and make the area a more lively place. Pedestrianization done poorly isn't going to be great, but pedestrianization, when done properly, is going to be, a jewel of the city. And, I think it's easy for me to imagine it, but I think for a lot of people who might have not had the same kind of experience and actually have, been to these sorts of experiences, they just haven't seen it before. So once we have this one, I'm so excited for that first weekend that we have this pilot on 17th Avenue, because initially all these doubters, all these dare I say haters, are going to immediately recognize, wow, this is great. I want more of this. I want this in my neighborhood. I want this in every neighborhood possibly, because it's undeniable that when we give these experiences to people, they love them. Am I ranting too much, Biz? I'm sorry.
This is actually really hilarious. I have no idea how it's going to look in the final video, but I disconnected from the call.
Okay.
My internet went out, and when I came back, you were still working the mic. So this is why we bring people who are passionate on the podcast. So it gives us that extra flexibility with subpar recording equipment. That's super funny.
I do need to head out pretty soon. Are we able to wrap up soon?
Yes, okay. We are ending this up pretty quickly. Okay. So yeah, absolutely, super fantastic. I think the survey is still up and going, ready to go. I'll put that link in the description for people who want to continue putting their feedback into the survey, because I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is how necessary it is to act towards something positive. Because what are you going to do when the negative force comes out and they get their way, and then nobody's happy and everybody's all cranky all the time? And I don't like Calgary being cranky all the time. That's what I'm trying to fix here. And so get involved. There's some street manual engagement coming up. There's very little that I know about that because it's still very much in the works, but the street manual will be coming out from the City of Calgary sometime within the next couple of months, and that will have all the information to deal with how do we create street environments that are better for people, even more effective at moving vehicles in a lot of ways. Once you make some of these quality of life changes, it really does help everybody. But too often those conversations are done with just kind of business interests in mind, and developers and people building infrastructure obviously have an interest in making these places really great places to live, but we definitely need to show up as activists and have those conversations so that we're represented in the city's policy documents on these issues. And so that's coming up soon. Get involved with that. I really want to do like a 17th Ave, more engagement on the street, kind of getting some of that data of how do people get here, what do they love about it, kind of what do they want to see with this pedestrian pilot program. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that as the year closes out. Definitely follow us on our socials. If you want to support what we're doing, hop into our Discord or hop into our forum and let us know what issues you're passionate about, and maybe some of you guys could end up on the next episode of the podcast. I love giving people the microphone when they're super passionate about these things, and so I'm super happy that Chris was on today to give us a very long podcast about a variety of very important issues surrounding pedestrianization in the Bow Valley region.
And, shout out to all the massive, secretive, shady organizations that are funding my advocacy. Shout out the WEF. Shout out the Illum.
Somebody's got to look into whatchamacallit. That guy.
Oh yeah.
That guy's a bit of a ghost. I think that guy has some connections.
The Illuminati. They've been a big supporter for me. JFK, actually, he's still alive, and he's been a big
wow.
He's been a big supporter, actually, of 17th Ave pedestrianization. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so get involved. You know where the location is. The password is Fight the Good Fight, and we'll see you in the next episode of the podcast. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now. Thanks, Biz.